Welcome to ERTT Radio. I'm Mike, your host. Thanks for joining us. Well, a lot has happened this past week, especially with the still looking for the Malaysian airline, the shooting at Fort Hood, and different political things that have gone on. So we're going to dive right into it. First off, we're going to talk about is the Fort Hood shooting. Now, those of you who have paid attention to the news, this is completely different from the previous shooting at Fort Hood. If you're not familiar with the last one, the person, I believe it was Hassan was his name, identified with Islamic Jihad ideology, plain up simple. He targeted a deployment line. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the military process, the deployment line is pretty much when soldiers are getting prepared to deploy overseas to Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever. They go through this line, and they get stuff taken care of, like their will, any religious issues that they need to take care of at the time, any legal things, power of attorney, etc. A lot of stuff a person has to take care of prior to leaving. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. Well, he specifically targeted this group of people and killed at least a dozen of them. Now, compare that shooting to this one, completely different. This person, they came out with a news press release like they normally do after an event such as this, and they said it wasn't particularly linked to his previous deployment, so they're not saying it was PTSD or anything like that. Pretty much he was denied leave at work when family members had passed away, and it had really upset him. And having my own mother pass away this past year, I can understand the loss of family. And it's not something easy to deal with. But I didn't go in and shoot up work either. So the way this person handled it was wrong. And the military in general, I know especially the Air Force, they've gone through a lot of different programs and processes that you can reach out to get help. I am more familiar with the Air Force's policies in dealing with them, but they have advocacy groups, the chaplains, you can tell them anything and they don't report it to your chain of command. I mean, that's kind of awesome. You can say anything you want and it's 100% confidential. So there are ways to vent and to, take care of emotional needs other than going in and shooting up the base. And that's what this person did. He lost his cool, and apparently he went back into his office later and shot up the office, and then he was driving to two other buildings, was shooting random soldiers as he went by. Now, most of the time when a shooting like this occurs, you get the knee-jerk reactions of, the anti-firearm agenda pops up. And, okay, so the guy didn't use a gun. Let's say he used a knife and stabbed a bunch of people. You going to ban knives? No, that's just stupid. What happens is the actual individual needs to have been taken care of. And, hindsight is always 20/20. You can say, oh, well, if they would have handled this different, they would have handled that different, this person would have been mad, he wouldn't have lost his cool, yada, 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 yada. You can't change the past. It's there, it's done, it's gone. And there's been at least 3 soldiers that have died due to this shooting. And my hearts go out to the families. It's not something easy to deal with. You go to work every day, you interact with the same person, and then the person just, loses it, goes in and shoots up the office with you in it. That's just not something, you ever really expect to happen. So a lot's going to depend on how the Army reacts to this. Now, the way they classified the previous shooting, which I did not agree with, the Army classified the last shooting as work center violence, not a terrorist act. Okay, they didn't want to classify him as a terrorist. Why? Probably for political reasons, but that shooting's already done, gone, and dealt with. Now this is more like a work center violence, because the person, targeted his work center, not a specific deployment group. He didn't identify with jihad or any of that. He just got mad at work and shot it up. So how the Army reacts to, dealing with the families, which, they died. Number one, we're still in a time of war. We have the war on terror. We're involved in conflicts around the world. And the families do need to be taken care of. So that is something that I think that they should do. And they shouldn't, jump into the whole, oh, well, we should just ban guns from the base. Well, if you have ever been on a military installation, and I've been on several, I'll use the Naval Air Station in Pensacola as an example. They don't search every vehicle. So it's not that hard to get on base with a firearm. Most bases don't search every vehicle. You have to have an ID to get in. Well, the Naval Air Station, because it's a museum, you don't even have to have a military ID to get in or get sponsored. You can just get in. And you can go pretty much where you're not supposed to go, and you could do harm if that was your goal. I'm not saying they should stop and strip search everybody either. That's not necessarily going to solve the problem. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the Army particularly deals with this situation. And I will try to keep everyone updated on the news articles on what comes out of it. Now we'll flip over and talk briefly about the Malaysian airline. Still, they're looking for it. They believe they found a signal. They're hoping that that's the black box of the flight 370, but there's no guarantee, and they're still looking for it. And that's pretty much all the news for it. I'm not going to beat a dead horse and give all the theories. They actually came out and said, well, we don't even know what happened, and we probably never will. Well, no kidding, Sherlock. I could have told you that. When they popped up 20 million theories of what could have happened, and nobody knew, and there was no proof. They had to have found a plane, and it's scattered all over the ocean now. It's been weeks. And some of the families were kind of suing the airlines because of the way they handled the whole situation. Which, I'm not a big lawsuit type person, and I don't think it's necessarily the airline's fault of the way it was handled. I think it came more down to the news media of the way things were handled. They blew the story way out of proportion. A 5-second, this is what happened, this is what we know, and that's it. That's all it would have taken. But they blew it up, they talked about it, they ran it into the ground. It didn't help the families out any. So if anybody should be sued, I would have gone after the news media. But that's just me. Now, flipping over to some of the political arena stuff that's going on, you have good old Mitt Romney. And he did this huge tour around a whole bunch of states. And it had people speculating on whether he's going to do a 2016 presidential run. Now he says, oh, well, I won't do that. I've already done it. I won't do that. But we've kind of heard that story before, and he ran. And no offense, Mr. Romney, but you went once, you didn't make the primary. You went twice, you made the primary, and the American people said, no, we don't want you. Okay, as I'm not saying I run the Republican Party by any means, but if I was running the Republican Party, I'd be like, no, if we want to win, why do we want to put a two-time loser up to run again? He's run for the president twice, failed twice. And they're not just in the primaries. He lost once in the primaries. The second one, he went up against President Obama. Okay, President Obama had already established himself as a big mistake in the presidential, I don't want to call it a palace, but you could probably consider it so, in the White House, in the Oval Office. He was a failure. And it was established so. And yet the American people didn't choose Mitt Romney. Why? Because he wasn't that much different in a lot of his policies than President Obama. So, no offense, Mr. Romney, we do not want you to run again. We want to win this year. We want somebody who is completely different from the person who's in the office now. We don't want the same old, same old. We don't want this middle of the road kind of guy. We need something different. Because if we don't get something different, the Democrats are going to keep winning. What usually happens, you'll have this flip-flop. You'll have the Democrats will run the White House or the government for a certain amount of time, and people get so fed up that they want to switch sides. So the wave kind of flips over to Republicans. Well, if the Republicans want to save anything, they'll go as conservative as they can to be completely different from what was going on, to give people that change. Well, when you put the middle of the road guy, people don't have that clear-cut option. It's kind of, well, we can go the way we were, which we really don't like, or we can go halfway. And it's about a 50-50. Most of the time, it's kind of like, well, do we really want that 50-50? We would really like something different, but we're not going to get that option this time. And the last presidential election kind of proved that, well, we really don't want the middle of the road. We'll go back with the left, with President Obama. And that is what they did. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the different presidential hopefuls possibly for the 2016 election. You have names like Governor Christie, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, there's Paul Ryan, another person. And looking at all those candidates, okay, just a few I just threw out there for the Republican side. Okay, Chris Christie, I've already talked a lot about him. You don't want to go anywhere near that territory. I don't like a lot of stuff that he's done now, and the media kind of pushed him as great and then found out something bad and then completely obliterated him. Well, that's kind of a heads up. Hey, this is what's going to happen if we try to push him. Okay, he's not exactly been the best of governors either. I don't know. I consider Governor Christie a lot like Mitt Romney, kind of that middle of the road kind of guy. We don't need that. Paul Ryan helped sponsored a bipartisan budget with the Democrats. He helped partnered it, and it did not help the Republicans one bit. It was another one of those middle of the road projects. Don't pick Paul Ryan. You're ever going to have the same problem. Yeah, he's young. So he's young. Okay, I can put any 35-year-old and say he's young and say he'd make a good president. If he's still middle of the road, you don't want to pick him. Well, hopefully you don't want to pick him. If you agree with more of the middle of the road type of stuff, be my guest. But if we want something different, we need to pick somebody different. Now we have Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. Those, I wouldn't mind either of them at this point in time. I haven't done a whole lot of research into Ted Cruz. I know a lot about Rand Paul, partly because of his dad, Ron Paul. As many of you know on the program, that's kind of who I went for the last presidential election was Ron Paul. He was uniquely different, and we needed uniquely different. We didn't need, another George Bush running middle of the road. We didn't need that. We didn't need, the liberal side running and the Republican Party to give us no choice at all. We needed something different, somebody that would have taken us away from the destructive policies that, well, let's face it, are in play today. So keep an eye out on who actually ends up running. And, as time comes close, I will narrow things down for you of who would be the better options. I won't tell you who to vote for, but I'll tell you who you probably shouldn't vote for based on how they run, unless you agree with what they agree with. And speaking of policies, let's flip on over to Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. Now, it came out this week that there were 7.1 million people signed up, and the Democrats are high-fiving, and the news media went on and on and on about President Obama doing this victory lap through the Rose Garden, and everything was awesome, and hunky-dory, the Democrats are awesome, and what? The Democrats are not awesome? Okay, how many people are in the United States? 350 million estimated? Now, when you make a law, it's to benefit everybody, right? You would think. It's a federal law. It's supposed to be beneficial for at least the majority, right? I mean, wouldn't you think so? It's the federal government. Okay, what is 7.1 million out of 350? Well, let's do the math here. That's a very small percentage. Okay, that's less than 3%. So you're telling me you've made a law that benefits, okay, doing the numbers here on the calculator, it's 2%. 2% of the population signed up for Obamacare. 2%. So you made a law that, quote, helped the 2%. Does that sound like a law we should have passed? You know, I don't hear stories of the lives Obamacare is saving. You know, I hear more about the people who lose their health care than have been benefited by it. Hospitals cutting services, people getting laid off. You know, the job market is seriously affected because you got to pay for all these penalties and everything else. You know, if I'm not sure what the the new date was, but the federal mandate, if you didn't have insurance by such a date, you had to pay a fine. Okay, so only 7.1 million signed up for this, quote, free healthcare. It didn't really help. Not even a majority of the people. Not even a quarter of the people. 2% of people were helped by the Affordable Health Care Act. 2%. Okay, let's put it another way. Okay, that means out of 100 people, 2 people signed up. Okay, now let's talk to that same 100 people. How many of you lost your health insurance because of Obamacare? There was quite a few people that lost their health care. I'd probably put that more around the range of 10% minimum. Okay, so the Affordable Health Care Act nuked a lot of people, a lot more than it helped. And, well, the political elite don't want to get on the program. Why? Because it stinks and they know it. Doesn't help anybody. All it was take your freedoms of choice. So they took your freedoms and gave you 2% back. 2%. Now, 2% are getting this affordable health care. Okay, now there have been speculations and stuff about that number is forged. They just pulled that out of their rear ends and threw it out there. Okay, so if it's less than 2%, that's even more embarrassing. All those people who lost their health care and only 2% benefited from it. How is that a victory? How can you see that as a victory? Not a lot of people wanted your stupid program. You know, there was a lot better options. You know, we wasted millions of dollars. And that 2%, how many of us are paying for that 2% to be on that program? Do you pay taxes? Well, yes, Mike, I pay taxes. I just filed them. Yeah, you just paid for all these people to have health care. The 2%. Okay, let's just throw this out there. Let's say 50% of people work. Okay, so 50% paid for 2%. That doesn't seem right. 50% of people that work, that's not counting the employers. That's people who just are the employees. They're paying for those 2%. Is that right? No. We should not be using the U.S. Treasury as a means to give handouts. And that's pretty much what the Affordable Health Care Act was, not counting the raising of premiums and everything else. And my opinion is the faster we can get this canceled, the better off we are going to be as American citizens. You know, this is not, beneficial for our country. It was a massive takeover of our health care. You know, for 2% people to be using it, now I could say, okay, if 60, 70% of the people are using it, okay, I could see the benefit of it. But no, 2%, and even that's a number that's stretched out. It's not a victory. That's a catastrophe. Even the news media, certain branches of it, are talking about, oh yeah, it was a good week for Democrats. That 7.1 information came out. Yeah, people, why don't you tell them the truth? That's 2%. Oh, well, we had 2% of people in the United States sign up for Obamacare. Why don't they say that? Because it sounds really small. And people respond better to bigger numbers. So that's all my spiel on the Obamacare issue. But we need to get that changed and get rid of it. Because if it's only benefiting 2% of the people, it shouldn't be a part of our federal laws, period. But let's flip on over to the closing down of the military bases in Afghanistan. We've been cutting the military to the bone for the most part. And because of that, this is going to sound pretty bad, but it is cheaper to leave military equipment and hardware in Afghanistan than it is to transport it back. Does that sound like a good use of taxpayer dollars? I'm not faulting the military on this. That's just straight up logistics. Now, I know probably 4 or 5 of you heard logistics and thought of a UPS commercial. Don't worry, I did too. But all that money and equipment, research, we put it over there, we set things up, and then, oh, well, we don't even have enough money to take it home with us. We're just going to leave it for you guys. What? And you want to get involved in Russia? Are you kidding me? Let's leave all our equipment because we can't even afford to take it home. Shoot, if I were the Russians, I'd be like, okay, let's sit here and let's get ready to take it. As soon as they leave, hey, Afghanistan, we'll buy that stuff for you. Minimal costs. And all we have to do is sit there and retrofit it. Or, we can break it down and learn its weaknesses. The easiest way to destroy American equipment. Why? Because that'd be perfectly valuable for us if we have to engage NATO. Something the Russians have done recently, speaking of the Russians, is that they've recalled their ambassador to NATO. So the tensions are not easing in Ukraine. The play on the Russians, I don't know where they're going, but they're not calming down, that's for sure. They have the equipment, they're ready and willing to use it. I doubt they're going to leave all their stuff there. No, they'll actually take their stuff home, or they'll keep rolling. I'm not saying the Americans should have kept rolling with Afghanistan. Wars are expensive. Russians know this. All they got to do is watch us. The billions of dollars we've poured into countries in the Middle East just to support wars that we really weren't getting a lot of benefit out of has really hurt our nation. And poor political decisions haven't helped that either. Am I saying we shouldn't have tried to liberate Iraq? No. But you got to look at their perspective. We went in and occupied their country for years. Were they ready for democracy? Well, you haven't calmed down any tensions in the area, that's for sure. When you create a huge vacuum of power, anybody with gumption and enough backing, enough guns to back them up, they'll try to take over and they'll try to influence things. We've got a big election going on right now in Afghanistan. And there's already been speculations that, it could, the Taliban is muscling around trying to affect the vote. They've even threatened to do so. That doesn't happen in our country, but our country is really unique on the way we were founded. We don't have to deal with terrorists knocking on the door saying, did you vote for so-and-so? Oh, you did? Kablam. Now, there's different tensions going on throughout the world. The issue with Russia, they haven't backed down. The European Union is now trying to advocate for Russia to leave. Okay, who else are we going to throw at these people? Okay, we sent them John Kerry. Ooh, that was the number one guy. Fail. Okay, well let's sick NATO on them. Yeah, let's sick NATO on them. Fail. Total failure. All right, let's stick the European Union on them. That'll get them going. Yeah, Russia isn't scared. They've seen how the West is tired of war, tired of these kind of engagements. And, sound familiar? Post-World War I? Tired of war, tired of conflict. Supposed to be the war to end all wars. And, oh, yeah, right. Didn't happen that way. So Russia isn't threatened at all by the European Union, NATO. When we threatened to put sanctions on them and threatened to stop them, and they play the political games to keep us stalled, but they don't change anything. And the news media is very careful about what they report. Why? I got a couple ideas for that. One is probably the fact that they know Americans are tired of getting engaged in war after war after war. To be honest, I'm tired of the constant conflicts. We're sending a several $billion aid package to Ukraine. Why? You can't just throw money at things and expect them to be fixed, but that's apparently all our government thinks of. Just throw money at it, it'll fix it. Yeah, let's throw $300 million on a website, it'll fix it. Yeah, that didn't work too well. Yeah, let's throw $1 trillion into a healthcare program. That'll fix it all. Oh yeah, we got fixed all right. So, Russia, not scared of us. Not scared of NATO, not scared of the European Union. So a lot has gone on in the past week that is affecting us throughout the world, how people view us. And the coming up elections is going to tell which way this country is going to go. Now, I know they always talk about the elections. Okay, this is going to be the one that'll be the make or break the United States. Well, to be honest, there is really none that's going to make or break the United States. It's going to be a culture that breaks the United States. The culture of, I'm owed something. The culture of, I'm tired of standing up for my freedoms. I'm just going to choose safety and security over them. And that is the culture we are breeding. And my thoughts on Russia and Ukraine? Personally, we need to let them handle out their own issues. If we're having to spend millions of dollars on equipment and can't afford to get it back home, why are we sending more stuff to get engaged in other conflicts? Does that make sense? Does it? Millions and billions of dollars of equipment and we can't even bring it home. And that's really all we have time here, folks. I know I touched on a lot of different topics. A lot has gone on this past week with the shooting, airline, stuff with Ukraine and Russia. Usually I concentrate on one topic, but I figured it was important to touch a little bit on everything this week. If you have any comments or questions, or you would like me to talk about something specific here on the program, you can shoot me an email at miked@erttradio.com. And remember, keep an eye on the news and pay attention to what's going on, because it's going to be important to our future how things turn out. And as always, live free and die free.